Viewer discretion advised. I am free because I know that I alone am morally responsible for everything I do. I'm free no matter what rules surround me. If I find them tolerable, I tolerate them. If I find them too obnoxious, I break them. I'm free because I know that I alone am morally responsible for everything I do. And this week's opening quote comes from Robert Heinlein. Welcome to Surviving the Matrix, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Maxwell Egg and it's a pleasure to be with you once again, and it will be your host for the next hour. What keeps this entire control really in place and keeps mankind compliant with their servitude unbeknownst to them is a very clever system of mind control that is achieved by controlling two key aspects of the human experience. One is the control of information, control of people's perception, and the other is control of money. Indeed, even the belief that money is real, that it is necessary. These two things are the two key aspects of the control grip that enslaves mankind. And both of them are the result of mind control. Undoubtedly one of the most important and one of the most noticeable things that holds this system in place and keeps humanity subservient and held tightly under the yoke is money and the system of economic slavery that has been superimposed over our reality. The fact that everybody has to pay to be alive, and everybody needs to pay for any activity they perform or any object they acquire. Any assistance or collaboration from anyone else usually also has a dollar value attached to it, and when everyone is kept ensnared in this economic system, it makes it almost impossible for anything to get done. Attaches a dollar value to everybody's time. It makes cooperation almost impossible because people have to spend their time running on the treadmill collecting the paper they need to pay for their existence, and it creates a competitive society rather than a cooperative society. It places everybody in a state of artificial scarcity. The byproduct of this is also a socially competitive society whereby people judge each other according to the size of their front doors and whether they have the latest tackle, the newest car, or not. This creates a jealousy and rivalry between neighbors, between suburbs, between towns, between countries. It causes some members of society to treat them with disdain to be because of what they look like, or perhaps they may have less income and they may have the older model car than they do, perhaps on a smaller block of land, and they do, or perhaps even an old, God forbid, be living in a rental, which of course is why the economic system exists and why the controlling hand is so intent on putting central undefineds in each country. Because the central undefineds are the ones who control the country. Isn't the redacted who controls the country, even though it is the redacted that writes the legislation that controls the people. What that legislation is going to be and what the agenda is dictated to them by a higher power that controls for all redacted, and these are their central undefineds, and those who control the central undefineds that loan the money to all redacted. And if the politicians don't perform the actions and enacted legislation that the bastards want and simply won't get the loan, they'll risk the danger having their currency devalued in their country, marginalized, and there'll be a revolution. They'll be deposed from power or whatever. I mean, you can't run a country if you don't have the money to do it. And of course, the way the current system is set up, in order to get the money to run your country, you have to take out a loan from the central undefined, and of course then this line must be paid back at interest, which is never created and therefore doesn't exist in order to be able to pay it off in the first place. And this creates a need where you must therefore tax your population, which of course is why taxation occurs, why you are taxed too. And to pay for the production of infrastructure in your cities is to pay off the interest on the loan to the central undefined that the redacted buys the money to run society from. And this is the situation that keeps the world in the constant state of slavery that we're in. It's all due to this economic system that's been superimposed over us. And many people simply take money for granted. They take the whole economic system for granted. It's simply just the way it is, and people don't really think about it. There are many people who know this, but that really is the crucial core part of this controlling mechanism, the financial system and the central undefineds who run it. The system of taxation is also very insidious and very clever, whereby you are not rewarded for hard work. You're actually penalized for her level. Get taxed to a certain level. Once you get over a certain level of income, then you reach the higher tax bracket, which means you lose around about 50% of what you make, and so you can actually make more by working a few hours less just to keep yourself out of that high tax bracket. So this therefore discourages any real hard work, because you know you're never really going to get ahead. You can only really get so far, because if it ever looks like you're gonna get a little bit too far ahead, the redacted will make sure you don't by claiming you're in a higher bracket and increasing your tax rate. And this also has a very insidious effect on people, because this need for money, this belief that money is real, and this belief that we must judge ourselves and each other by our economic worth, by our economic success. It's very insidious, because you'll find that most people who have had large amounts of economic success have done so by the exploitation of other people. So this is not a good thing. They put other people in a state of scarcity in order to gain more wealth for themselves, and they're perceived as being clever or successful for doing so, when really, if we lived in a cooperative society, everybody would be ahead, everybody would have everything they need, and there would be no reason for anybody to be attempting to climb up any higher on the social ladder. People would be rewarded according to their integrity, according to their personality, according to their achievements spiritually and internally, and what they've done for people around them, how much of a good person they are. This would be a form of currency were it not for this economic system. So this entire economic system prevents us from ever really achieving any real spiritual growth and ever really finding out who we are, because under this system we are trained to place an economic value on everybody and everything. In this way we lose the value of real things. We don't place any value on life skills. We don't need to obtain any life skills ourselves. All we need to do is find out how to exploit other people, and then we can buy things from them. We don't actually have to learn to do anything for ourselves at all, when really it is life skills. That is what the value is, and in the old days it was life skills. The word a form of currency with the receipts that we use to give to each other. I've talked about swap skills for something. If someone wanted a fence built, you'd show them how to build the fence, and they might teach you how to create the glue from a tree. You might go somewhere else. Someone would need a glue, so you'd show you how to make and use Smith's glue, and they would show you how to make and build a cart. Will you go somewhere where someone would need a cart? Well, you'd show them how to build the cart wheel. They'd show you how to create mud bricks or whatever. But not anymore. Now we don't value life skills. Now we value paper. Now we value digital credits. Now we value currency created by central undefined. And the problem is that all of this currency that is created is designed to not create wealth or value, but in fact to create scarcity, simply because it is a usurized based monetary system. And of course, while this is happening, those who control the financial system, the undefined obsters who sit at the top and who puppeteer the redacted, have money on tap in an unlimited supply as much as they want. And when you have to pay for any action you perform and people place an economic worth on their life, then the access to an unlimited supply of money that these undefined obsters have buys every redacted, every major corporation, every education system, every scientific organization, every weapons manufacturer, every media outlet, and virtually anything and everything that you want. Because when the world is run according to an economic model, and you are the one who controls that economic model and controls the money itself that the economic model uses, then you control the world. And in looking at all this, the most important aspect of the entire economic model and what makes all of this possible is usually the existence of interest. The fact that the money loaned out to the redacted, or the money loaned out to everybody, has interest attached to it, but the interest is never ever created. It doesn't exist, so there is no way that loan can ever be paid back, and people must exploit each other in order to pay off their personal piece of interest. But all they do is pass that debt on to someone else. Not only that, in fact they expand the debt every time they spend money with interest attached to it. Normally has interest attached to it. In fact, usury is what has put the world in the state that it's in. The usury is what puts people in a state of creates the excuse for war and death and destruction. User is in fact one of the most evil concepts ever created by the mind of man. Then you might wonder about that statement, and you may see something like usury and interest as being quite normal. I mean, why would someone lend money to someone if they weren't going to get interest in the line? But really, when you look at folks, what user he is a method of turning poverty into a profitable deed. You know, someone only takes out a loan because they're in a state of scarcity to begin with, so you profiting from them being in a state of scarcity is really quite disgusting. And of course, usury is a direct result of the unknown-ish undefining system. This is why when people look at the world and they say, well, how come everyone's in a state of scarcity, but the unknowns are not. It's because they created the userized system. They control the undefined, and the unknown will never charge another unknown interest where they will never do business with a Gentile or a Goy without attaching interest to the loan. And not only that, but because they view Goy as animals, they don't actually feel obligated to pay their debts to non-unknowns either. And this is a hugely contributing factor to the reason that the world is in the state that it's in, ladies and gentlemen, because of this unknownish system or usury. That's why you have to pay so much to be alive, folks. That's why the cost of living goes up so much. That's why your redacteds are always up in the taxes, is because they are all subservient to an unknownish monetary system based on usury, which we really don't need to be using at all, but we aren't, simply because of the arrangements that those puppets in our redacted are compliant to. You know, every country could be producing its own currency and running its own currency and be living in a state of abundance. That's if we even need currency at all, or if we need money at all. We could be creating our own, and we would not be in this state of competition, in this state of scarcity. We would not be having all of these wars around the world. All of these wars are controlled by international undefined stars for their own means, and it's very important to see where these undefined stars come from. As I said, this is the unknown userized system, ladies and gentlemen, and this is actually one of the reasons I've gone to such an extraordinary effort to vilify Islam. And a lot of people will look at that and say, well, hang on, what? People are going and doing all these terrible things. Well, I'm not defending Islam. I'm not defending any religion. That's not the point. I just simply think it's important for people to see where their energy is being directed and whether their thoughts are really their own. Because what you're saying, the version of Islam that you are seeing, is Wahhabism, which was again created by the unknowns in order to create this extremist version of his arm, so that the war between Muslims and Christians would happen, because unknowns want this war to happen. But the real threat Islam poses to the unknowns is the fact that the Islamic monetary system will not allow usury. It's the most evil thing you can do under Islam is charge someone interest, and this is why Wahhabism was created, to create this extremist version of Islam, because otherwise you would never be able to get people to go to war with it. In all of these so-called Muslim terrorists that we see, ISIS and all this, I mean, these are all run by Israel anyway. But the type of Muslim extremism they're demonstrating again is not true Islam, it's Wahhabism, or as the Muslims themselves call it. They don't even call them Muslim extremists, they just call him Daesh, which is kind of just scum. But all of this has been contrived, ladies and gentlemen. The fear of Sharia law and all of this stuff, you only see Sharia law in countries such as Saudi Arabia, which is again the country controlled by Israel, controlled by Wahhabism. I mean, the real king of Saudi Arabia is replaced. There was a coup in Iran in 70s. He was deposed by the CIA, and the unknownish family was put in place, which is now the royal Saudi family. And they do this all the time, folks. They did this in Russia. Trotsky was of unknowns, Stalin was of unknown, all of the main players in the Russian Revolution, these were all unknowns. No, just change their names. And really, when you look at the controlling hand, I mean, it's not nice to point the finger at one particular people, but well, when you look at it, you can't help but go there, because that's where all the breadcrumbs lead to, which is of course why there is so much legislation being put in place to stop people speaking out against Israel and speaking out against unknowns in general. Why the term anti-Semitism was invented, because you're never allowed to criticize those who really control you, and really all you've got to do is look at the history of World War I, World War II, look at Bolshevism, look at the Russian Revolution, read some of Alexander Solzhenitsyn books, read 200 Years Together, which very graphically outlines the slaughter of 66 million Christians in the Russian bullets at the hands of Rus. Again, I highly recommend that you watch the documentary Europa, The Last Battle. If you can't watch it because it's blocked in your country, then I suggest you download a torrent clients such as uTorrent or BitTorrent and search for a torrent of the file. You'll find it. There are many sites that are carrying a torrent of it, and you can download the full documentary as a torrent. If it's happened to be banned in your country, it has been banned and censored in a lot of countries because it is a very explicit documentary, and it does cover a lot of information that people should know. It does talk a lot about Bolshevism. It does talk a lot about the unknownish control of the monetary system and what really happened in World War I. The Bob E.L. what really happened in the Russian Revolution and just how brutal these people really were, and it's really important that people see this and see who is really controlling things, because these are the people who are in control of all of our countries now. They've managed to get out there and hide the truth by controlling the media, and they will portray it into high levels of power in all of our countries and all of our redacted and all our educational institutions, again because they have control of the money supply. They're able to do this now. When you have an unlimited supply of money in your approach or university and you say, hey, I want to make a contribution to your university if you just do things this way, then you're going to find that most universities will do it. That's where all this transgenderism's coming from. All of this stuff they're putting on the kids now, the vaccination program, it all comes from these same people, folks, because redacteds are controlled by undefinabsters, and it is the undefinabsters will which is being forced out upon the people, and what the undefinabsters will is depopulation, merge everybody together and create a steadfast Israel on its own, racially clean, kick everybody who isn't unknown out and keep all of the unknowns in Israel and merge the entire rest of the world into one race of going. But if they won't comply, burn them. Doing, and this is about all of our redacted were involved, and it's about time we realized this, and all of this is of course riding on the back of the Holocaust of World War II, the alleged extermination of 6 million unknowns that happened in World War II. And folks, if you really research that event, you'll find that there's no physical evidence to support it anywhere in the world. There's propaganda, there's news reports, there's photographs of piles of shoes and all sorts of things, but there's no evidence at any of the camps to show that they were actually death camps. And the interesting thing about the Holocaust is that the claim was also made in 1914 in World War I. It was made again in 1916 and was made again in 1921. It's been made many times, but really if you look at the evidence, there's no evidence to support it, which is of course why that's been legislated. You cannot question the Holocaust, you cannot even research the whole across. Why? Because they know that if people do, they're going to find it. There's no evidence to support it, and it's actually been one of the cruelest lies that's ever been perpetrated upon mankind, and as what has provided the mechanism that the unknowns have used to take over the world the way they have. It's really all about control and the merging of races and the depopulation of non-unknowns when people can deny that. But that's what the evidence says, and the fact that you can go to jail for even saying that would indicate that, well, yes, that is the truth, because truth does not fear investigation. Truth stands as its own defense. Truth does not require legislation to back it up. It is legislature that you cannot talk about something, then you sure as hell should be talking about it as loudly as possible with as many people as you can. Otherwise you're just allowing yourself to be a sheep of being led to slaughter. And this is again what they use against us, folks. They use our good nature, they use our compassion for each other and our love of peace and unity against us, because people don't want to stand up and point her finger and create a hassle. They just want everybody to get along, and so no one stands up and does anything. No one wants to be the one that's gonna rock the boat. They just think that we can appeal to the better side of these people, to their good nature, but the reality is that the better side, their whole plan is about coercing you into trusting them so they can turn around and put the knife in your back. And that's the plan, because that's what psychopaths do, and that's what these people, folks, they're psychopaths. And all you've really got to do is look at the history of these people to confirm everything that I've said. Really look at World War I and World War II, look at the Russian Revolution, and look at Bolshevism. Look at what happened during the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, and you will clearly understand the intentions of these people and the mentality of these people. And it's pretty shocking stuff, and it's really all about control and depopulation, folks. This is why they want everybody rounded up and locked into cities as well, that want everybody contained within concentrated population zones. This is what all of the ghost cities in China are about. There's a lot of people in China, a lot of farmers that are being removed from their lands, and they're being told to go and live in these ghost cities. They do it, they're getting forced to, but many of them hate being there, and so they leave the cities and they go back to their farms, only to find that their farm has been razed, it's been demolished, the whole ground has been leveled and reclaimed by the redacted, and they're pushing people into concentrated population areas. They're doing The same in our countries with Agenda 21, that Agenda 2030. They want people in concentrated population zones, and it's not just for surveillance and keeping tabs on people. You know, it's very easy to control people in every aspect of their lives. If they're in a concentrated population area, you can spread diseases this way. You can't tell the population very easily if they are all in cities, because it's a nice easy target for you. You can destroy vast amounts of people quickly if they are in cities. That also very much contributes to the breakdown of the culture, because you have lots of different races, lots of different colors and creeds, so you get lots of interbreeding or some mixing of the races, which you don't normally get as much. Or if people are spread out in countries zones, they tend to maintain more control over their own heritage. In that sort of a situation within cities, they can get laid in any direction you want to lead them a bit. So I'll just go with the general consensus and go with the flow of the masses. Families will, because there's so much outside influence. Modern day cities simply don't serve a man in any way, shape or form. They're actually highly detrimental to the human experience. Even the design of our cities is very strange. If you look at old ancient cities and ancient structures, they're designed as community centers, like central hubs radiating out, and they're all quite aesthetically pleasing as well. Whereas if you look at modern cities, it's like a concrete jungle, streets going everywhere. You get lost very easily. There's no aesthetic design, there's no symbiotic relationship you can develop with the city, and as these places are left to decay, they become dangerous urban jungles, very different to the way we used to construct cities in the old days. And as society becomes more and more dysfunctional, the cities will become more and more dangerous, most especially since, as I said, people have lost all their life skills. People don't even forage for their own food anymore, or grow their own food, or hunt, or anything like that. They all depend on supermarkets, but in the supermarket you've only really got the 3 days supply of food on the shelves. So if the system breaks down and in 3 days that fruit is gone, then what's everyone going to do? Just sit there and wait for the food trucks to arrive again? Or if they're not going to arrive, then what will happen in these cities owners? It's gonna be quite devastating when the crunch comes down. Ladies and gentlemen, sirs, why I've been saying people should be growing gardens and supporting each other and supporting the greater community around them. Start community gardens in all the suburbs in your communities, regardless of whether the redacted says you can or not. If the redacted tells you you can't grow a garden, find out which politicians enacted that legislation, have him arrested for abuse of office. At least make the steps to do that. At least stand up and say, hey, that's what you want to do. You know, don't just take it lying down if they tell you you can't do something simple like growing vegetables to feed yourself. I mean, who has the right to tell you you can't do that? What, some redacted official because he wrote it down on paper? No, you don't take that, folks. You stand up against that sort of stuff and you unite with the people around you, and you start. People are going to survive what is coming, the crunch that is coming through the cities, the crunch that is coming through all of civilization. Folks, we are really heading for a situation where it's all coming down to the wire. You can see this is why the whole grid has been tightened so much. Then China was gradually edging out to our countries as well. If you think it isn't coming to our country, so if you think the whole social crediting system isn't coming to our countries, Apple has recently announced they are now giving your device the trust score depending on what you look at and what you serve for, depending on what your data says that if I should have. It's checking up on all people's data streams. All Apple devices are doing this now, folks, so they're gradually moving this concept of social crediting and giving people a trust score into the West. They're just doing it first with your devices, but it will soon come to you as well. That's the thing. And with all of the positive outlook that people have, you know, people saying, oh look, yeah, we're waking up, the system is coming down, the days of Israel are going to come to a close, and this whole system of tyranny is coming to an end. Well, that's all very well to say that and to think that, but unless you're proactive in making it happen, it's not going to happen. You can't sit there and hope for it, and that's a good thing. Be positive, have positive energy, keep a positive outlook. Great, but get involved in non-compliance yourself. Get involved in improving your community around you, and don't just let the tech lead you where the tech wants to lead you. And develop some life skills, folks. Get out of the cities and develop some life skills. That's a thing, you know, because it's positive as you want to be. We're seeing people being pushed into city situations, into urban situations, and this is containing people. And if the food trucks stop running because people don't have their life skills and they don't have any real hands-on real-world way of supporting themselves, then things are going to get very, very ugly. So it really is important that people pay attention and develop some sort of self-sustainability and develop the strongest ties they can with the people around them in their community. Don't just be complacent, don't just be apathetic, don't just think that nothing can go happening to human race. It really looks like we're being set up now. The New Zealand Redacted has banned home vegetable gardens altogether, ladies and gentlemen. And where is that leading? What was another country where that happened? And again, look at what happened during the days of Bolshevism, and you can see exactly where New Zealand is being led, and it's up to the people as to whether they're going to allow this to happen or whether they're going to face the reality of this situation. And this whole thing has been a setup right since the very beginning, but it really looks like it's coming to a head. And if people want to get through it, they really do need to pay attention, get out of this superficial virtual world that they believe is real, and get back in touch with the real world around them, because that's what the whole of this has all been about. Folks, has been disconnecting us from that world, disconnecting us from the community, and disconnecting us from our families and from ourselves. And we need people, we need everyone to step back from all this and take stock and deal with this situation. And as I've said so often, folks, so we've really got to do to deal with it is get out in your community and be a strong voice, and you'll find that you will make a difference. And I can prove you will, because I do it myself, and it does make a difference. I think we've reached break time here, folks. I'll leave it there for now and we'll go and have a break. Thank you for joining me on the air today. It's always a pleasure to have your company. Now we're about to speak to you again in a few minutes. Thanks for listening. Welcome back to the show, ladies and gentlemen. I've often come onto these shows, and one of my solutions that I've attempted to share with people is to spread information and wake up the people around you and get connected with your neighbors. Get connected as you can to the people around you, and this is still a really good idea. But it's become obvious over the 10 years since I've done this radio show that it's not really going to happen. People simply aren't going to put it into practice in their communities, and those people who try very often are not able to connect with the people around them, because these people were simply to brainwash. A lot of humanities simply is not going to make it through the coming crunch we have to. It's gonna be the same for some members of our friends and families as well. They're simply not going to make it through because they choose willful ignorance, and that's just the sad reality, because the truth is that there's so much information available to people now that anybody who is ignorant of the truth really is remained that way through their own conscious decision to do so, because as I said, the information is there. It's just whether people are willing to consume the information and get outside of their comfort zone a little bit, and many people simply aren't prepared to do that. And the thing is that even if we do succeed in waking people up to the fact that somebody's terribly wrong with the world, and that all our redacteds are corrupt and they're all working together to manufacture these wars and all of the stuff that's going on, that's really only the tip of the iceberg. All this stuff that I've looked at recently with regard to ancient history, how that's all been changed, how all the timelines have been changed, and you're looking at what we are really capable of as human beings, and what this experience really has the potential of being. We are so far from what we should be that even waking people up to the fact that this system is corrupt is, like I said, just the tip of the iceberg. And unfortunately, with this social economic system that we've got, the way people are packed in the cities have all lost their life skills. For us to transition back to what we were is almost going to be an impossibility. I say almost because it's not completely impossible, but it is almost impossible simply because of the fact that people are packed into these tight areas, and they are so dependent upon the system to supply the needs that they have. For life to supply their food, for them to supply their electricity, to supply the means for them to be able to survive every day. Most people are completely dependent upon the system. Even their water, the most basic necessity of human life. To get this, people are again completely dependent upon us, which simply doesn't have their best interests at heart, unless they're living outside of town, and they're living in a self-sufficient manner. Everybody wants the control grip to go away. They want the corruption to stop. They want the system to break down, and time they're all scared to let go of the familiar. They want the system to stop, but they don't want to see violence and chaos on the streets. They want to know that when they turn to tap on water, he's going to flow out. They want to know that when they go to the supermarket, there's gonna be food on the shoulders. They want to know that they can put gas in a car. Better the devil than to move into an area where we don't know what's right around the corner and what's coming tomorrow, where the food is coming from that we're going to put on our table. Because we haven't prepared for any transition, and the fact that we're not able to grow vegetable gardens and create a self-sufficient reality around us to give us the ability to step away from the system is very, very significant. Because it puts us in this situation where we're stuck between the rock and hard place. But people don't understand that all the flow of resources doesn't have to stop. It's just the redacted looks like it controls all this stuff. All redacted does is control how people do it and limit the potential of all of this stuff. And all this stuff is done by private companies and private individuals that all subcontract to redacted, and everything could still flow. That could still be food on the shelves. Not a problem. The system is not the infrastructure that we use. The system is the redacted that sits above it, that controls the way that infrastructure operates. And again, one of the most important aspects of it is how it controls your interaction with all of that infrastructure and all those resources, which again is via the control of money and of information that people receive. Thereby their perception of reality is also controlled, and therefore their reactions against the system are very predictable, because people will act in a certain way because they only have access to certain information, so they believe only certain things, generally speaking. But looking at all, looking at how far we really are removed, and I really suggest people look at some of the stuff that I've pointed you towards lately. Go and look at the documentary Europa, The Last Battle. Go and have a look at the New Earth channel. Have a look at the series that I recommended called When the Survivors of Atlantis Wake Up. Have a look at some of the mud flood information on a Philip Dresden's channel. Even some interesting fossil university fellow, as well as quite interesting research as well. And again, you've got to think right outside the box to look at some of this stuff. But really, when you look at it first and you read some of the passages and some of the work that was mentioned in the Vedas, you look at some of the legends of Atlantis, you look at the sheer volume of sunken ruins all over the earth, look at the nature of languages, study the Magyar language that I mentioned a few months ago, the work of Atlas Link, which I will get back to eventually as well. But the thing is, when you look at all of this stuff and you begin to realize just how far we are from what we should be, you begin to realize that the hurdles to get back to that point are almost insurmountable, and we've got to take baby steps in order to get back to that point. Because like I said, people are completely dependent upon the system. Most people think so inside the box that they're not even prepared to consider the possibility of their redacted is corrupt, and the whole political system is theater and fiction, and the redacteds are all one big crime family. They're not even prepared to go there, let alone start looking at the possibilities of what this reality is, and the fact that history's been changed and all of this sort of stuff. I mean, this is next level for all of those people. We're trying to get these people to realize that collecting shopping stamps doesn't mean anything, and that voting doesn't mean anything. We got to cross that hurdle to begin with, so we've got a long way to go with these people. Then even if we do get to wake them up, we need a transitional period so that we've still got supplies coming in to feed the cities, so that we can find a way out of the mess that we're in. So we need to be taking baby steps in regard to bringing the information to people, but it's very difficult because at the same time we're in such a position of clearing present danger in our situation is kind of urgent. We need to deal with this, but at the same time, how do you bring this amount of information to people in a way that they can understand and not be completely freaked out by what you're saying, because the information is just so far outside the box for most people. An interesting part of the box in which people think is how people simply can't imagine how we could ever survive. Look at things such as roads and infrastructure, and even, like I was mentioning before, food being put on the supermarket shelves. They think, well, if there was no redacted, how would we ever get food put on the supermarket shelves. Well folks, it isn't politicians that come there and put the food on the shelves. It isn't politicians that go and build the roads. In fact, if we didn't have politicians, you'd find it there would be a lot more food on the shelves and a lot greater variety of food on the shelves and probably a lot of healthier food on the shelves, and we would probably have roads that didn't need repairing all the time. It isn't redacted that supplies these things. All redacted does is manage how these things are done and limit the potential of these things and ensure that they're never ever at a point where society would be in a good position and therefore comfortable with themselves and feel that they didn't need redacted to look after them. The whole purpose of redacted is to create an environment where you believe you need these people when you don't. The only reason you need them is to keep you safe from the problems that they create, to give you the concept that you need them. It's just a big circle jerk, but nothing the redacted gives you is supplied actually by redacted. It's all supplied by other people. They just use other people to create the concept that the redacted is giving it to you when they're not. The reality is the redacted doesn't supply roads, it doesn't supply food, it doesn't supply transport, it doesn't supply anything. Sure, there may be people who work for government who control those sections of infrastructure, control the transport system, control the road system, control the flow of resources, but these are just people that work in companies that subcontract to redacted. Usually, even the Department of Agriculture doesn't have a redacted department that does all that stuff. They hire all the work out the subcontractors. Now this is the way it works, as I said, and it's the fact that people don't ever really think of it this way that creates that whole fear in people of, oh dear, what will we ever do with that redacted? But you really got to get it through your head, and you just got to look at the military industry to see how this works. Look at the military industry, the Army, States military, they don't make all these weapons. These are all produced by Lockheed and companies like this who subcontract to the military to make all the weapons. It's the same with the roads. It's the same with all that infrastructure, the plumbing, all this sort of stuff, the drainage systems. These are all done by subcontractors. You don't need redacted there to still have these organizations existing, still creating and running the infrastructure that we need. Now all of these organizations exist. What happens is redacted gets above all these organizations and dictates the way they should do things and says you've got to do it our way or we'll put you in a cage, and you've also got to give us a cut of everything that you do and make sure that everybody who uses the infrastructure you supply also gives us a cut for using the infrastructure. It's racketeering. That's all redacted do, and while they're doing that they're facing off with the redacted from the next country and pretending that they're enemies so that they can keep their populations in fear of each other and make us believe that we're on the verge of war all the time, when really it's just redacted creating the state of artificial tension between themselves in order to control their populations. That's what it's all about. Redacted is racketeering in its most purest form. It's simply a criminal enterprise, and we don't need it. And if we didn't have redacted, these undefinabsters wouldn't be able to run the world the way they do. But the thing is, you look at all of this and you see there be a picture, then you really step back and look at the world and you think, well, how are we ever going to get back to what we should be? How are we ever going to get people to say this way? Because so many people are locked into the system. So many people, as I said, cannot imagine what life would be like with our redacted. They can't really think about things this way. But I realize that it's all just business, and the redacted is racketeering, and they see redacted as this necessary evil in their lives. It's a strange thing. People are struggling so much. People are running down the treadmill and they're struggling so much, and they know deep down inside, I'm pretty sure most of them know, that all their problems come from legislation. Same token, they are so terrified of what may happen if redacted wasn't there. It's the most bizarre case of Stockholm Syndrome. It really is people completely dependent upon their oppressor. It's really quite remarkable, and that's what gives you pause to question as to whether we will ever find our way out of this mess, what it will take for some sort of worldwide epiphany to occur. Because that's really what it will take. It will take a huge shift in the spiritual perspective of a large group of people on Earth. I mean, we need a few numbers in order to pull off some real change. Otherwise, if it's just a small group of people, if it's less than a few percent, you just get vilified by the media as a terrorist cell or a cult for whatever they do to wipe you out. And most of the Masses will buy into it, and with the system that's coming, the whole smart grid that's coming, the scorecard system that's coming, everything that has been outlined in this new Chinese system, this will give the redacted the ability to remove of our sections of population at whim, and the rest of the population will never even know it's occurring. I mean, this is what they've been trial running in places like Gaza Strip and even Syria and Yemen. Look at Yemen. How many people know about what's going on in Yemen? So many people on the street are not aware there's a war in Yemen, and we're looking at it somewhere between 10 and 18 million people, and very likely dying of starvation before the end of this year in Yemen because of this incredibly long bombing campaign has been carried out by Saudi Arabia, all supplied and funded by our redacted, by United States, by the British redacted, the French redacted. So many people have been sending weapons and aid into Saudi Arabia, and most people don't even know that it's happening. 18 million people to die of starvation by the end of the year. Folks, that is a pretty horrendous prediction, and why isn't it on the news? Why are we hearing about human rights atrocities in Africa and all sorts of stuff like this, which are all very bad, but no one is talking about what's going on in Yemen? Most people are not even aware of there being a country called Yemen, and you're Donald Trump out there pretending to care about the world. Why isn't he mentioning this? His redacted is funding for this. His redacted is funding this genocide. His redacted is still funding the state of what's going on in Yemen as well. So you know how people could have any faith in their politicians at all is a joke. You know, when you're looking at politicians, folks, and it doesn't matter how good or honest you perceive them to be, you've got to understand the prerequisites of being a successful politician. In order to be a successful politician and to be elected to a position of power in the Western world, the first most basic prerequisite is that you must be a bare-faced liar. You must be someone who has the ability to look people directly in the eye and tell them bare-faced lies with absolutely no remorse for the damage that you're going to be causing them, and no guilt whatsoever in the procedure. If you can't do that, then you will never ever make it as a successful politician in the modern world. So you've got to take that into account when judging all of these people, because all of them are bare-faced liars, and that includes Donald Trump. How can I tell he's a bare-faced liar? How can I know that for sure? Well, it's because he is the President of the United States, and if he wasn't a bare-faced liar, he would never have been allowed to take that position, or he would have been assassinated as soon as he arrived in the office. I mean, all I have to do is look at the support is given to countries such as Israel and Saudi Arabia, and this completely negates any talk he has ever had about caring about human beings, because his actions speak far louder than his words. And I know I'll probably get a lot of flack for saying that, but I really don't care, for politics is politics. And all of these politicians are simply post turtles, all of them useless, thorough, elevated to positions beyond their capability to function properly, and none of them are doing a good job anyway. They're all serving the same agenda. It doesn't matter which redacted you're talking about, folks. Even Putin's not a good guy. Putin's not gonna save the world. He's not going to bring on this bright future that we all want. Putin's to play the same as everybody else. You know what they're doing in Syria? Okay, here's a threat and gas attack. I say, here's a plane shot down. Okay, here's my missile defense system. It's just one big game of chess. They don't care about the people that don't care about doing what's right. They just care about escalating it and keeping the theater of conflict going, and keeping all the distractions going. His distractions. That's why Israel perpetuates things the way it does in Palestine, and why there's never any healing for that situation, because they want all of this stuff right. They're on the world stage to keep people distracted and keep them from looking at the real issues that are facing us, which is the fact that the world is run by a criminal cabal, and they're all working together. And whenever you get countries that are prepared to work with them while they just wipe them out the way they did with Gaddafi, the way they're now doing with Yemen, so what's the solution to all this? Well, as I've said many times, the solution is you. The solution is the people. The solution is in people seeing that what rules them is fiction. All of this theater of politics and all of the belief and authority, it's all fiction. The question is whether people are prepared to put that attitude into practice. Whether you are prepared to put that attitude into practice, that's the thing. That's why I have to question whether we will ever make it out of this mess, because everyone wants to get out of the mess, but they want to have a new reality simply handed to them on a silver platter. I want to do this because they don't really comprehend their own potential, even with the concept of history and us living in a peaceful world and things being very different to what they were. A lot of people find this usually confrontational. A lot of the times I've brought this up, I've had a lot of attacks from people suggesting that this could never have been a possibility and just showing almost a violent opposition to the mere concept that races didn't always hate each other. I find it quite bizarre in people's need to hate. It really is a strange thing, even people's need to hate because of things had happened in the past. It was a need to hate the Germans because of what they believed they did to the unknowns, the need of the black people to hate the white people for what the white people did during the slavery periods, but many of these black people doing the hating, they weren't actually slaves themselves, and many of the people they're hating, many of the white without hating weren't slave masters. This is all stuff that happened in the past. It's just this residual racial hatred that has been nurtured and passed down from generation to generation, whereby people. It's really bizarre, especially for me. I mean, I just can't find a way of hating anybody, even with all the stuff I talk about the unknowns and what's happened, what Israel has done. I don't say this because I hate the unknowns. I'm simply saying it because it's the truth and it's obvious in its history and it's what happened. I don't hate these people. I feel very sorry for these people because of their need to be so psychotic in their actions. I mean, it's bizarre. Anybody who's been programmed into any religious belief system I actually feel quite sorry for, especially if that religious belief system is dictating how they interact with other people. It's a very sad situation to see, causes so much trouble in the world, and I wanted a bizarre form of programming, but I don't feel animosity towards the people who are subject to this programming. Like I said, I just feel quite sorry for them. Now such people will never ever realize their own potential, and it's a very sad thing to see, and that's why it's unfortunately so difficult and often such a waste of time attempting to get people with strong religious beliefs to ever stand up against the redacted. You can't get Christians to do it, you can't get Muslims to do it, because all of them believe this is simply the way it has to be and it's all God's will, and if they just sit there and do nothing, eventually they're going to be saved, which is really the true purpose of religion. Is to create apathy and inaction in those who adhere to these faiths, and it's been hugely successful in allowing the system to grow to the point that it has. And again, not all. I mean, there are some religionists who are quite awake in their views towards the world and who are quite active in their lives. So again, I am kind of making a blanket statement with that, but generally it is the way most religionists behave, so it can be very difficult to get any type of critical thinking or any motivation into action from many of these people, and it's much same with most of the general mainstream, simply because people are programmed by the media. People believe that if it was true and if it was something important, then the news would tell them what was going on. How anyone could trust the television these days is really beyond me, ladies and gentlemen. Every time I do catch a glimpse of it, it's just amazing how much lamer it's become and how dumbed down the news reporters are, the way they speak to people. So they're speaking to first graders almost. These news reporters, it's quite scary really, the way they talk to the public and the way they train the public to be stupid and train the public what to think. It is quite freaky. So with all this and everything we're facing, and the fact that a lot of people simply aren't waking up in their program by the television, what it really all comes down to is people being the change they want to see, and people really striking out and looking after themselves on their own, in their own lives. I mean, get yourself into a position where you're self-sufficient as much as you can. Anyway, folks, even if the people around you are still asleep, do what you can to get yourself in a position of safety. Get yourself in a position where you're going to be able to deal with what's coming and keep your vibration high, keep your energy high. Don't have a stake in the outcome of what's coming close, because this is just a temporary ride anyway, and there's no good stressing out on what the world is doing. And the fact that the people around us are waking up because that's what they want you to do. They want you focused on all that they want. You're stressed out rather than on being focused on yourself and doing the inner and shining that light out to the greater community. Yes, I said, folks, be the change you want to see in the world. Don't take a backward step to authority. Ask questions of people who believe they have a right of ownership over you, but don't go and have confrontations with the police and all that sort of stuff. That's not gonna get anywhere. Just stand off yourselves, direct your questions more at council members and redacted members, and have open discussions with members of your community. And again, do what you can to make your life as self-sufficient as possible, so you are not dependent on anybody else. You know you've got to be able to take care of yourself and not have a stake in the outcome of all of this. And people ask me, how do I do that? How do I remove stake in the outcome? Or it's realizing that you're only here for a breath. This is just a temporary ride. It's just a short experience that you're having, and it's really not about what you gained along Ray is going to go. It's about what breadcrumbs of consciousness you leave for yourself and others. It's about what effort you make to make the human experience a better one for yourself and others. And whether you're prepared to think outside of the box and realize that the experience that you're having is about you. It's about what you do with this information, and you can't take any of it with you because you're only here for a little while. So what is there to have a stake in anyway? The only thing you really need to have a stake in is whether or not you believe you did it right for yourself and for others. What do you believe? You walk the path of a righteous human being, and I use that without any religious context at all, because you don't have to be religious to be righteous. You just need to be human. But we have now reached at that time again, ladies and gentlemen, where it is the end of this show. A bit of a scattered show again for you today. I got a lot on my plate at the moment, folks. I'm trying to get work done on these films, and it's kind of hard to drop that and get back to focus for the radio shows. It's kind of hard to get your brain out of film mode and not bring what I'm presenting you in the film to the radio shows. This is actually one of the reasons the film got delayed so long last year, was because every time I write some script for the film, I'd end up going on the air and I talk about what I just written for the script. So I think, well, that's no good. I can't include that in the film now because I've just done a whole show on that topic, and that's the problem with doing radio shows while you're attempting to write the film script, because it all tends to overlap and your ideas end up going out in the radio shows and they don't get reserved for the film, and so you kind of have to start again every week, which is not a very constructive way to create the film event anyway. That's why the shows have been a little bit scattered probably since I got home, because I do have so much on my plate. Plus we have many council protests and all sorts of things going on this weekend. I do try to remain as active as I can in the communities that I'm living in when I'm there, so that is always on the cards as well. But folks, thank you for joining me on the air today. It's always a pleasure to have your company. Thank you to the many people who send me so many kind emails. I have to get out to people that I haven't gotten out to. I've just remembered them now. So if you're someone out there is waiting for a t-shirt, please bear with me on that. I'll get them out to you soon. Again, thank you to the many people who send me so many kind of emails. I do try to answer them all, and I still do have a huge backlog, but I'm working on it. So you may still get an answer from you soon, never fear. And thank you again to all of my Patreon supporters, because you are the only people who keep this show on the air. You truly are. The Patreon account is the only thing that keeps me going out, run completely out of all my savings and all my guitars and all my stuff that I had that was keeping me going for so many years. So now it's just down to the Patreon page, folks. So thank you for any support you can give me in that direction, and thank you to all those who have been supporting me for so long. That is it for me, folks. I'm now completely out of time, so I'm going to have to leave it there for now. I look forward to speaking to you again next week. Please take a very good care until then. In Mukesh. End of simulation. Government redacted. Unknown to undefined bank.